This is In the Fast Lane, live from the Australian Grand Prix, with your hosts Matt Clayton and Michael Laminato.
And we are live within the Fast Lane, the official podcast of the Australian Grand Prix, as we count down to the 2022 Formula One Heineken Australian Grand Prix at Albert Park on Sunday. I'm your host, Matt Clayton, and we'll be with you for an hour each day over the next 4 days with a whole host of special guests, including drivers, team principals, and some of the sports insiders stopping by for a chat. A little later on this hour, we're going to catch up with Williams Racing F1 driver Alex Albon, while Sky Sports F1 pit lane reporter Ted Kravitz is also going to join us. Joining me as co-host, as he does for every episode of In the Fast Lane, it's F1 journalist Michael Laminato. Hello, Michael.
Hello, mate. Happy Australian Grand Prix to you.
Happy Australian
How
Grand
good is it to be back?
It's so good to be back. Even the weather's turned it on for us. But also joining us is a young Australian who's had rather a big week from the BWT Alpine F1 team. It's hello to Melbourne's Oscar Piastri. Welcome, mate.
Hello, thank you. Hi, everyone.
I mentioned you've had a big week. Firstly, happy birthday for yesterday.
Thank you.
A week at home, you've kicked a footy on the MCG. You've driven some go-karts around the one of your old stomping grounds there at Port Melbourne, I would have thought. 21st birthday yesterday. Not all home races are like this. You do realise that, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty knackered, so I kind of hope not, but it's great to be here, and you know, it's obviously been a long time coming for the Grand Prix to be back here at Albert Park, so it's great to see everybody here. The weather's turning it on so far, but knowing Melbourne, it'll probably be pissing down in a couple of hours, but yeah, it's good so far, but it's been a busy week, and I'm enjoying it so far.
Hopefully about 6 p.m. Sunday once we're all done. But look, being at home and getting a taste for all of this, it just whets your appetite, doesn't it, to actually be here for real, in inverted commas, for next season?
Yeah, I think being part of the F1 paddock this year and, you know, sort of being there as a job is still pretty damn cool to say. So, yeah, being here as a professional and, you know, on this side of the barrier and not with you guys as a fan anymore, it's a step up for me and something I'm still getting used to. So it's pretty cool.
As Matt mentioned, 21st birthday yesterday. You've accomplished a lot for 21 years old, obviously. You've arrived in Australia as a Formula One driver, reserve driver, but nonetheless signed up. How does this compare to your expectations when you set out from Australia all those years ago?
I think it's definitely exceeded them. You know, when I left Australia at the beginning of 2016, and I was still in go-karts at that point, so it's been a quick rise. But yeah, at 21 years old, I definitely didn't think I'd be an F1 reserve driver or, you know, part of the F1 circus at the moment. So it's still very cool to think about. Obviously, still finding my feet and getting used to it, but it's been awesome so far.
It's been a week of new experiences for you. What's also new this year here is the track. It's the biggest modification this circuit's had in 25 years as a Formula One venue. Did you manage to get around it yesterday? Have you had a look at it from close quarters? And what do you think this revised layout might do to the racing? Because we've known in the past how races here tend to play out. Do you think there's going to be much of a change?
I think so. I think with these new cars, obviously we've seen in the last couple of races in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain that they can follow a bit closer and overtaking is a little bit easier. And in the high-speed sections that we've got now, it doesn't seem to affect the cars so much. So now with that fourth DRS zone down to turn whatever corner it is, the fast chicane, that looks really cool.
9-10, I think we're
9-10.
Yep.
I think into there it's going to be the main passing spot, to be honest, which at 320 or 30 k's an hour, it's going to be interesting. So we'll see. I drove it on the sim. It's pretty cool on the sim. That whole back section that's been changed now, it's super quick. So hopefully it'll be a good spectacle to watch.
We could rename a campaign to rename it the Cool Chicane, I think. We don't have very many corner names here, so maybe that's a good one. I want to talk about your position with Alpine. Obviously, you're working with two pretty established drivers. One, especially established, two-time champion Fernando Alonso, also Esteban Ocon. What's it been like working with them? What kind of things can you learn from them by shadowing them in the team?
Yeah, it's been great working with them so far. Obviously, Fernando doesn't really need an introduction as two-time world champion, but sort of getting used to, you know, the way he goes about his racing and you know how he pushes the team to improve, how he pushes himself to improve, and you know Esteban is very much the same. Obviously, we're much closer in age, so probably have a few more things to relate to off the track. But yeah, it's been great learning from both of them so far.
Yeah, Fernando's probably still got a BlackBerry. He hasn't put that in the museum yet, but I'll let you tell him that. But look, we say 2022. It's amazing for old people like me to think that it's 20 years this year since probably the signature moment in the history of this Grand Prix. Mark Webber finishing 5th for Minardi on a debut. One of the most remarkable afternoons this place has ever had. And of course, Mark's played a pretty significant role behind the scenes with you with the mentoring, the management side. Give us an idea of the wisdom that he can pass on with his career, but also the fact that he's still current, he's still very plugged in with the paddock. How's that helped to shape you on your journey so far?
Yeah, so Mark's role with me is very much behind the scenes as my manager, and especially now that I'm sort of in and amongst the F1 circus, he knows everybody there, and yeah, he's really taking charge of everything sort of to do with the paperwork, signing on the dotted lines everywhere, and that side of things. And of course, he was a successful driver himself, multiple Grand Prix winner, and won Monaco twice, I believe.
Correct.
Should get that one right. But yeah, so he's very helpful on that front as well. So yeah, it's great to have Mark in my corner.
What's success look like for you this year? It's your first year in several years, probably since you started driving, that you're out of the car for the majority of the year. How do you analyse your progress in this season?
I think firstly, whether I end up on the grid next year or not, that's the first indicator. But there's a lot of work for me behind the scenes, especially in the simulator back at the factory at Alpine. So that's where a lot of my work gets done for this year. And also we're doing a big testing program in the 2021 Alpine F1 car across the year. So that's pretty much all my driving for the year, which is pretty cool to have a testing program in an F1 car. But that's really where I can try and hone my skills and improve even further, and hopefully sign a contract for next year somewhere.
And one final one, Oscar, before we let you go. Look, the team's been pretty competitive. The first couple of races, a few grey hairs for your team boss, Otmar Safnauer, on the pit wall after Saudi Arabia with Esteban and Fernando carving each other up there. But what are you thinking about this weekend based on the two circuits that we've been to so far? Very different of themselves, and then this is a very different place again. What do you think's a realistic target for Alpine this weekend?
I mean, it's always a bit hard to tell. I think the Ferraris and the Red Bulls probably have the pace on the rest of the field, and Mercedes sort of there or thereabouts in third, a bit in no man's land. So I think we proved in the first two rounds we can be fourth quickest at Alpine, and obviously Saudi was unfortunate that Fernando had to retire because it was looking like a P6 and P7 finish. So hopefully we can be firstly in the top 10 with both cars, and the higher up in the top 10 we can get, the better.
Look, Oscar, we'll wrap things up there. Look, we really hope that you enjoy this week. We're certainly hoping to see you in a higher seat this time next year and enjoying it a little bit more. Thanks very much for stopping by.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.
Michael, Oscar Piastri, a young man in a hurry, and a young man that, in our time dealing with him with the podcast, you can just see the evolution and the growth in him as a person as well as a driver.
Yeah, absolutely right. You can see that he's ready for F1 now. It's going to be really interesting to see his evolution over the course of this season as well. Obviously, as a reserve driver, being able to observe up close drivers who are well established, obviously one of them being Fernando Alonso, and a team that's on the up as well. So it's going to be fascinating to see what progress he does make this season, of course, in anticipation of his debut, hopefully, in 2023.
And Michael, we are very lucky here to be joined by Williams Racing F1 driver Alex Albon. Alex, welcome back to Melbourne.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. It feels like last time we were here was a little bit strange, obviously, having a day here, but it feels amazing to be back, and obviously everyone's looks like they're having a good time already. I'm excited.
It's funny, Alex, when you look at how much things have changed. Your one Grand Prix here. I was looking at the school photo at the start of the season. You're standing there in a set of Toro Rosso overalls before your debut. It was a debut at the time that caught a lot of us by surprise, probably you a little bit, because I guess in 2018 you probably weren't expecting to be racing F1 in 2019, were you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was shitting myself for my first race. It was one of them things where, you work. It's your dream, and Melbourne has been for a long time. The first race of the year, and it's not an easy circuit to do your first race on. It's really tricky. It's a street circuit, and it requires a lot of confidence. And you're just getting into Formula One. Everything is new. You're learning all the buttons on the steering wheel. You're learning how to drive the car. and then you're flying across the world to this circuit. It's a big ask, and I remember I think I put it into the wall straight away in FP1, and I was like, well, okay, here we go, and it took a long time to build up. I think I only started getting quick during qualifying itself, and it was like Q1, building up to it, and then by Q2 we were on pace. And I remember my teammate at the time, Daniel, he thought I was sandbagging, and I was like, I really wish I was.
I wish you were, yeah.
Because it took a long time to get up to speed, but it was a cool time.
It's been obviously an up and down trajectory of you to get to this point, back in the car now, thankfully back in Melbourne as well. How do you reflect on your last couple of years? Out of a Formula One car last year, but not out of racing completely. Where do you arrive at the start of this season?
Yeah, it's a strange position to be in. It feels like I've had a year out, but at the same time, I've been constantly in the paddock. I've been spending a lot of time with the guys in Red Bull, on the simulator, speaking to Max and Checo. So even though I wasn't racing, I was still heavily involved in the whole circus, and I actually feel more prepared now this year than I did before. And it's purely just lacking the actual driving side that I needed to get up to speed with. So I felt like I still feel I have a point to prove. I feel more experienced. I feel during that year out, I spent a year to really focus on my weaknesses and see where and how to fix them. And it's hard when you spend a year out because you can't actually do them things, but you can get a good idea of what you want to try and change. And I feel like I've come into this year more complete, and obviously we're not really where we want to be right now as a team, but I feel quietly confident in myself, and I feel like it's part of my job as well with the experience that I do have from Red Bull to help lead the team in a certain direction. So I'm enjoying my racing.
Do you tell people how involved you were building the Red Bull car that's winning races this year? It's down to you completely, right?
Yeah, I told Red Bull, I said, well, if it goes well for Red Bull, I'll take all the credit. But if they have a terrible year this year, it wasn't my fault. But yeah, I did a lot of development work for them for this year, so I'm taking all the credit.
While we're on all matters Red Bull, the final race of last season, little on the controversial side, bit going on. Give us an idea as to what that night was like in Abu Dhabi from the inside. We saw a lot of what was going on from the outside, but there was unprecedented as a word that gets thrown around a lot, but it was an absolutely crazy night with protests and counter-protests, and are we celebrating a championship or are we not? Take us back there to that night, because that was wild.
Well, honestly, Sunday night was a bit more of a boozy night than anything else. I don't remember the short moment after the race, but I just remember I remember we were all on a yacht, and then I don't remember much after that. So, I mean, it was a good night.
So you were told.
Yeah, I wouldn't tell you. I can't tell you what went down immediately afterwards. I think I'm just trying to think back now, but yeah, it was a good year. It was a good day, to be honest. It's so strange because yes, it was a lot. There was a lot of things going on with the incident and all that kind of thing. But it's strange because actually internally in the team at that point, it was like we weren't thinking about that. It was like Max has won it on the day on the road, and I know it is controversial, but at the end of the day, it was almost like everyone was just celebrating because it was so short term. It was in front of our eyes, and we didn't really see the whole picture in that way. And so it was just one of them things where we were celebrating. And even for me, I wasn't in the car, but I felt like I contributed maybe 0.5% in it, but it still felt like part of it.
Yeah.
And then that's what I mean. We finished the race, we took a shower, and then off we were.
Off you went.
This year at Williams, obviously arriving in a completely different situation. You're arriving at a team as well where Nicholas Latifi's been there for a couple of seasons. What is your, I guess, mental approach to a year like this? Obviously, the team is rebuilding, trying to achieve a more competitive situation. How do you change your mind into that approach now that you're in the car and also doing the business as well?
It's different. As you said, there's great investment in Williams now, and we're on the rise. I mean, it's not where we want it to be, but if you look at where we are compared to the top teams, the gap is still closed. It's just that there are some teams like Alfa and Haas that have obviously made a big step forward. On our side, my approach now is I got to see the landscape a little bit. I'm still getting up to speed. I'm still shaking off a little bit of the rust, but at the same time, I'm listening to Nicky's comments. Nicky has great feedback. He understands what the car was like previous years, and we definitely see parts of the car from last year into this year, and we're just trying to find the right feedback and attack the main priorities, and that's kind of where Nicky and I and the work we do, the experience that I have from before, is just trying to find them moments and making sure basically as a team we're developing as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
And working with a teammate that you've already worked with before, that's got to help in terms of collectively bringing this team back to where it needs to be.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Nicky and I, we get on really well. He's a super nice guy, and he's fair. You know, there's no politics within the team. We know that any advice, any feedback we give is just going to bring us closer and closer to the midfield, and that's our goal. It's very easy to play mind games and all that when you're up at the front and you're in your own world, but it's a real team effort right now, and it's not just Nicky and I. It's everyone at the factory. It's everyone at the racetrack, and we're working hard, and I feel like it's just a matter of time before we get into that fight, and once we are, we're hopefully getting some points and wins.
So finally, Alex, as we wrap up here, first race for you at Albert Park in 3 years, first points of the season on Sunday, achievable?
I think a win is achievable.
Well, clearly.
And a big night afterwards, I guess.
And a big night afterwards. I don't see yachts, but I see these small boats in the background. So maybe that's the thing we're going after. But yeah, it's going to be hard points, truthfully speaking. But it's the start of the season, and as you see, there's so many DNFs that you just got to be in the right place at the right time. I have a 3-place grid penalty, which isn't great, but we'll see.
Look, Alex, we wish you all the best for the weekend ahead and for Williams for the rest of the season. And thanks very much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Welcome back to In the Fast Lane Live here at the 2022 Formula One Heineken Australian Grand Prix. And Michael, we just had Alex Albon on before. It's funny when you look at the school photo of the first race of the year, which I always used to refer to it as, this is obviously only the third time that Australia hasn't hosted the season opener in its F1 history here, but so much change in such little time. And you look at someone like Alex Albon, turns up for Toro Rosso, as it was then. Mm-hmm. The next year he turns up for Red Bull and doesn't race. The end of that year he's out of the sport altogether. And here he is with Williams in 2021. I think the only driver you could say that's had a more up and down career in that time would be Pierre Gasly.
Yeah, well, no coincidence. They're both from the same part of the sport, aren't they? It's great to see him back because, as we all saw in those early years of his career, or early year and a half, really, I guess, he's an incredibly talented guy, really quick guy, a lot of potential. It's the reason why Red Bull brought him back into the fold in the first place, which is why we want to see him on the grid. And Williams is his chance to prove himself. He's had pretty good 2 rounds as well. Qualifying in Bahrain, in particular, was very strong. As he adjusts to the car, we'll see stronger results still. And for a team that is rebuilding too, I think he's in a really great position to try and capitalise on that and potentially lead that team.
It's interesting with that second Red Bull seat, it's become a little bit of a poison chalice since Daniel Ricciardo left, because there's a job description that you have to fill to be in that seat. You would argue that Pierre Gasly's more ready for that now than he was when he was put in there in 2019. But that's one of the stories now. I think he's absolutely ready for a seat in a team like that. Is he ever going to get it?
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? It's a question that, it's been asked for many years now, because it's been clear that, it was even clear before he went to Red Bull Racing, really, wasn't it? That he's quick enough for a top-line seat. Something clearly didn't click for him. I thought was really interesting in the last week, Helmut Marko was reported as saying that if they don't move him up, they'll lose him. He knows they're going to lose him. Such a change in language from the idea that they would inevitably Red Bull drops drivers, right?
Yep.
Now they've got a driver who might be walking out on that program. So it's a clear understanding that he's big business in Formula One now. He's absolutely doing the business. Other teams would be crazy not to sign him if he went out and looked for another contract. It's definitely one to watch in the next 12 months, really.
As long-time listeners to this podcast would know, I am probably a card-carrying member of the Pierre Gasly Appreciation Society at this point, but I honestly think that guy is a genuine world championship contender in the right seat at the right time. I think he's that good.
I wouldn't disagree with you. It's clear. I mean, last season was his best season in terms of point score. He's a race winner now as well. It's always important to get that off the back, and a podium getter now too. There's not a lot left he has to tick, really. There are no empty boxes left for him. And it's really exciting too because he's one of that young generation. He's been around for about 5 years now, but still a young guy, very much fits into that Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell, Albon bracket. He's just got to find himself into one of these seats. And we hope in the next few years, the way the rules have developed, there will be more seats available for drivers who are capable of winning races, and hopefully he'll find himself into one of them.
But you look at that, I think he's 26. So Verstappen and Charles Leclerc are both 24. They've got their positions in those particular teams. We know where Esteban Ocon is. George Russell's now in at Mercedes as these teams look to build towards that next generation. The question is, if Gasly doesn't stay in the Red Bull family, where does he go in order to be able to fight on a similar playing field with some of those guys of his generation?
I mean, that's the question. That's why he's got to hope there are more competitive teams. I mean, already, while Lando Norris is locked down at McLaren, for example, and Ricciardo's there for another year, we've all seen, and something we'll talk about over the course of this weekend, I'm sure, that McLaren's taken a bit of a step backwards. You need more teams to be stepping forwards. On the other hand, you look at a team like Alfa Romeo that has made that step forwards. Yes, still behind the front runners. At the moment, that's still only 2 teams. But potentially, with the equalisation measures in place, the cost cap, all those kinds of things, we might see the teams that are at the top of the midfield now, and that includes Alpine, for example, make that transition to becoming race winners. And if that's the case, then there are many options for someone like Pierre Gasly.
Quite frankly, you wouldn't mind being in a Haas right now either,
No,
would you?
absolutely right.
I've never said that sentence in my life. You wouldn't mind being in a Haas right now, but you look at what they've done in Bahrain and Saudi so far, that looks like a seat that all of a sudden has become quite coveted.
Yes, well, and Kevin Magnussen's got it, hasn't he? We spoke to him last week in the Fast Lane podcast, and he's just like a new Magnussen now, isn't he? He's refreshed. He's got a completely new attitude. I thought it was really interesting the way he said that having lost his F1 seat a couple of years ago now, coming back to Formula One so unexpectedly, having written off his Formula One career, he's racing without fear that he can make a mistake and lose his chance again. Because he's been there. He's been on the other side. He knows what it's like. Life's all right for him. He won the races elsewhere. He's got a family now. He's got lots going on. And I think as a result, we've seen him reach this new level. The question is now, where can Mick Schumacher fit into those plans? And I think we should be optimistic. I mean, he's a guy who shows progress over years, and I'm interested to see how he goes this season.
Well, and I think now that you've got a car that's capable of fighting for something other than last place, Magnussen is a known commodity. We know what he delivers. So I think we're going to find out quite a bit about Mick Schumacher in the next, 20 races before the rest of this season. His career arc could be defined by what happens between now and the end of November, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I think this is... I don't want to describe it as a probationary year. I think that's probably too strong.
It's a little harsh.
It's a little bit harsh, but I mean it in the sense that he's in the Ferrari program, right? Like his ultimate track is to Ferrari, the factory team, where Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc are at the moment. That team's full right now, right? And there's no prospect, unless Sainz has a particularly ropey year, which I just don't believe because he's too good for that. There's no way into Ferrari at this point in time. It would be very easy for Ferrari to turn around after a sort of average year and say, well, we don't really need a young driver. Your career sort of stalls here a little bit. A strong season, on the other hand, would create questions for Ferrari. They would never drop him in that situation. And then they will help him make sure he finds his way in Formula One. There is a lot riding on him for this season. He's got a really established bar to measure himself up against as well in Kevin Magnussen. But I think you'll get there. I mean, let's remember his Formula 3, Formula 2 season. Second year was always very strong compared to his first. Took 1 year to get his feet under the desk. Last year at Haas, very difficult year. Maybe we'll give him another year. He'll get there. I'm confident we'll see certainly a stronger Mick Schumacher.
Interesting this year, and I don't know how much of this plays into such a massive regulation reset that we've got this year. Very little driver churn. We're talking about a lot of guys who are established that are jumping from one team to the next. But he got one rookie on the grid this year. And I'm wondering, I mean, obviously someone like Guan Yu Zhou comes with financial implications, as you would. It's a car that lots of drivers have played in the past. But you do wonder if there'd been more of a we've got our next guest just here. If there'd been less of a regulation shift, perhaps whether we'd seen some more drivers on the grid this year.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's always a problem for Formula One, isn't it? This year we're going to have FP1 sessions dedicated to rookie drivers, for example. Every team needs to run a rookie for a couple of free practice sessions a year, and that will help with that. Because this is the first year in quite a while, really. We've been a little bit spoiled in the last few years that we haven't seen even the champion of Formula 2, of course, was Oscar Piastri, make his way to Formula 1. We've been spurred in the last couple of years, haven't we? We had, of course, the Russell Norris Albon class, for example. We had the Mick Schumacher class. He made it into Formula 1. But this year, we haven't had one. And it's always a problem for Formula 1. But on the other hand, you've got to say we've got a pretty strong grid overall. Rookies have to make their argument to make it in a sense. And, I think no one would disagree that Piastri deserves to be on the grid. But
absolutely,
it's up to him to make the argument.
And if it sounds like we're gratuitously padding here, Michael, we actually are, because our next guest has decided to come in through the public area. Ladies and gentlemen, Sky Sports F1 pit lane reporter Ted Kravitz is in the house.
I think everyone just about said hello to you, though, on the way in, though, so that's okay.
Hello, rev heads. Is that a thing?
That's a thing.
You got it in mind.
I was told a friend of mine is coming down from Sydney. He works in the city. In
Sydney,
Sydney,
mate.
In the city. And he's coming down for the day. In fact, is he here? No, he's not here. And he got a Rex plane, which apparently are not propellers anymore. Rex have got some actual planes. Did you know this?
Australians don't fly anywhere, Ted. We've been locked down for 2 years. We wouldn't know.
I know. I thought Rex were all the propeller planes. And he said there are a lot of rev heads in Sydney coming over. So is anyone here from Sydney? Yes.
It's a lot of people.
Of course, what you have to say... Oh, look, yeah. There's someone from Sydney. Excellent. Of course, what you're meant to say, as a Melburnian, as I believe, if you say anyone tells you that they're from Sydney, you're meant to say, well, no one's perfect. But is that the thing or not?
I've got to say, after 2 years, we're just happy to see people again.
Yeah,
I think,
suppose
to be
so.
honest, no matter where you're
I
from.
suppose.
Now, Ted, before we start, I do need to issue an apology because you made an early season appearance on the podcast, and I said to you, look, Melbourne weather in April, no good. Don't pack your sandals. You'll probably need like 3 jackets and everything else. No, you still might, mind you. But this is glorious. Now, of course, this is unusual for you because Formula One hasn't had a day race since the Sao Paulo Grand Prix last year because it's just been night upon night upon night upon night. So you can stop your vampire existence.
That is a brilliant statistic and one that I shall steal shamelessly
with correct
for
attribution.
the television. That's true. My gosh, that's true.
Five
We've
straight
not
night
had
races.
a day race.
Anyone that follows Formula One in Australia watching them at 4 a.m. is very, very aware that we've had 5 night races.
He is good. He is good. I must apologise for being late. Can I blame Louise Goodman, who said that I wasn't on her schedule? I wasn't on until 45. And Louise Goodman, she does the TV.
No, we know.
My TV wife from the ITV days.
That is a callback.
I'm a serial adulterer on TV Wives. I've started off with Louise Goodman at ITV, and then we're still together, effectively. Then it was Lee Mackenzie at BBC. This is not the question you asked me, but
that's fine. I'm just
anyway.
listening at this point.
And then at Sky, Georgie Thompson, Natalie Pinkham, Rachel Brooks, and now Naomi Schiff. So I'm a serial TV wife bigamist.
You get around,
sorry about
Ted.
that. Sorry about that. Yeah.
He gets around.
But no divorces. 6 wives, no divorces. It's like Henry VIII.
How'd it turn out for you?
Yeah.
I don't really know where to take that, to be honest.
No.
But look, welcome.
He had 8 wives, didn't he? No, 6 wives. 6 wives, yeah.
You should know. You're English. Come
I
on.
am English, yes. Anyway, yes. Thanks for the tip. I did, because of your advice, Matt, bring a jacket.
Right.
I didn't bring a blazer, though, which apparently you're meant to do if there's an important person in the paddock.
Oh.
I think I might have seen the premiere of Victoria just now.
Yes. I wasn't aware of the blazer rule, though.
Oh, well, I think you need to be smart, don't you? Anyway, yes.
Quite too warm.
Lovely to be here, yeah.
Yes, it is. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
And
Have we all recovered from the trauma of 2020? No? Okay. All right, good.
Some of them haven't left.
This
Some
is
of them
our
were chained to
therapy.
trees.
This is our therapy.
It's therapy. This will be a good therapy. It'll be a good therapy.
Absolutely collective therapy. I like to think of still this is the first round of the season. We consider the first 2 races practice races.
Yes.
Consider this is the traditional start.
Yes.
Certainly been a somewhat unexpected start to the season. At a minimum, I'm talking here about Mercedes, right? We all thought that they should at least be a pretty good shout. They've done well over several regulation changes over the last 7-8 years since 2014. What's the vibe in Mercedes from what you've seen at the start of the season? Because this is really the biggest challenge they've faced since the turbo hybrid era.
Well, slightly depressing, actually. And that's a weird thing to say because, this is a team that has excelled over the last 8 years and they've aced every rule change that they've had to come across.
Yep.
So what happened this time? And it looks like when do you remember they turned up for Barcelona testing and they had these sort of fake side pods and we all thought, it doesn't look too adventurous. It looks like a kind of normal, bit of a vanilla 2022 car. And then they took them off. And Barcelona wasn't so bad. They had a bit of the bouncing, but it was okay. And they took them off, expecting in Bahrain to be quicker, and it made them worse. The new side pods made the car worse. It's like, how has it got to this point? And also, what bothers me as far as Lewis Hamilton, and no one's kind of saying this, maybe we should say this seeing as we're amongst friends here, but, this was the car that was meant to deliver justice for Lewis Hamilton in his eyes for Abu Dhabi. This was the car that Mercedes promised him it was worth not retiring for. This was the car that was going to be, they said, well, you have to come back next year because, otherwise George Russell's going to win the championship in this amazing car that we've got, which hasn't got any side pods. And so, hopefully they can turn it around, but it's going to take a few races, and they need to figure out whether it works with the no side pods that they've got. Because in a sense, you look at the Ferrari, you look at the Red Bull, they've got more bits of the car that are holding on to the floor, securing the floor, stopping the porpoising. Mercedes have only got a very small footprint, if you like, of bodywork, of side pod, that's holding onto the floor, allowing the rest of the floor to vibrate and cause a lot of to flex effectively, cause a lot of porpoising, which they weren't expecting. And that's their problem. So what do? I mean, you build a floor made of metal, really stiff. That's going to add a lot of weight. You put more sort of those metal stays in there. Again, weight won't look very pretty. So you can see why. It's a really difficult one.
A case of the hare and the porpoise, you might say. But that's a bad dad joke, isn't it? I'm here all week. But what's interesting, I think, Ted, is that you saw these two teams embroiled in this, I don't know from your perspective, but probably the most intense championship fight we've seen at the end of a regulation set. So you would have thought that, okay, both these teams may be a little bit behind the 8 ball because they're devoting so much attention to 2021. If one team was going to start a season like this, my money probably would have been on Red Bull, given they had the changeover with the powertrains and everything else that was going on. And given, as you said before, Mercedes have got this history of acing these rule changes. So to your mind, looking at Red Bull, because clearly, they've already won a race and they were on for a podium in Bahrain before the two cars packed up. What have they got right, given that they were spreading themselves so thin towards the end of 2021?
Two things. First of all, they've got Adrian Newey, a guy who was around the last time we had ground effect, and did a university study, I believe, at Southampton, and understood what was going on. And it's a younger team. This kind of oldest design guy at Mercedes is James Allison. He certainly wasn't around. Maybe they could have got some help in from elsewhere. It's like a movie idea, isn't it? It's bring in the old designer from his shed where he's turned to whittling wood into figurines. I used to be a designer in the 70s. Can we bring you back in? You'll never be able to do it. And it's like someone should do that movie. Free idea for you out there. Someone do the movie about an old designer who's brought back to help Mercedes out of their trouble.
Who would play the old designer? I guess that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a good... Stellan Skarsgård. There you go, random name for you.
Done.
He's got that weird sort of Swedish accent.
The Swedish accent, you mean?
Yeah. You'll never be able to do it. It's too difficult. I'm old. This game has left me behind now. So first of all, they've got Adrian Newey. Second of all, I mean, they weren't looking too hot until the new package arrived pretty much for the last day of the third test in Bahrain. And that new floor and the new diffuser that Red Bull brought transformed the car. And I don't know if you remember, most of you probably got better things to do than watch the live testing, or if you saw bits of it, you might have seen a clip of it. Max Verstappen did a very good time, and they cut back to Helmut Marko, who did this sort of... did you watch it? Did you see that shot? He did a sort of smug grin, which is better than the usual things that Helmut Marko does, which is sort of a growl at a driver who's displeased him or something. But he did this kind of, and that kind of said it all, didn't it? That was like, oh my goodness. You don't see Helmut Marko very happy very often, but having been not so great, and it looked like Ferrari were going to have the run of it in testing, it was that last upgrade package that Red Bull brought that got a smile out of Helmut Marko that nothing else has managed to do, and has mean that they're the winners of the last race. And now Ferrari have to bring something to get back at them, don't they?
I like that as a rating system. Helmut Marko smiles.
Yeah.
It only goes up to 1, but that's very good. Have you got time for one more before we?
Yes, I have a production. It's my own fault. I'm giving 2 long answers.
That's okay.
Who has the terrible thing of mopping up my awful appearance? Who's next after me? We've had Piastri.
We're not going to top you for the day.
Piastri Piastri and Albon. That's good. It's good stuff.
That's pretty good. I want to ask you about Ferrari because they're, of course, the other title contenders this year, or so it seems like. So we hope that is the case. It's always good to see Ferrari back. But it's been a long time since Ferrari's really been at that level of competitiveness, and we've seen sort of glimpses over the last couple of years and then a lot of mistakes, particularly in a strategy sense. What do you want to see from them this year to know this is going to be a sustainable title challenge for them?
Well, they've got the engine, right? So that's good. They seem to have the class-leading power unit, and we see that from Haas being up there, from Alfa Romeo Sauber being up there as well. So they don't have to worry about that, which is great. And I want to see just enough development to last them not only until the end of this season, but also through into next season. Because you look at that car, you look at it, you'll see it on track tomorrow. I'm sorry they're not out, but and you think it's so boxy, and with the Baby Bell scoop in it, or the whatever you want to call it, and you think it's so huge. Surely sort of trying to shove that thing through the airflow, it shouldn't work, but it does. It works really well, and it's predictable and it's drivable, and the guys can do something with it, and it responds well to setup. It doesn't have the porpoising. It's got great traction, which is why Leclerc knew that he was able to let Max Verstappen go in Bahrain, because he's got better traction and actually would get him on the run with the DRS. And this messing about with the DRS, which I hope we're not going to see here. Tell me it's going to be different from Bahrain, because that was a bit weird. It wasn't really motor racing, was it? Basically just standing. It's almost them coming to a standstill before they went out for that last straight in Saudi. But anyway, they've got a lot of good things about that car, and they just need a little bit more pure pace downforce to actually get through whatever Red Bull can throw at it. Because I don't think any of us really want to see, now Max has recovered from the DNF in Bahrain, him winning the next 5 races. Because you don't want to go through to Miami, European season and think, oh, Red Bull are just going to walk this. Another world championship for Max Verstappen. Might end up that way, but at least we want to fight with Ferrari.
Well, look, we know that Formula One's in a better place when Ferrari's stronger. Ferrari has typically been quite strong here at Albert Park, so we'll see how that shakes out this weekend. Ted, we know you've got a million things on and too much luggage in your hotel room, thanks to me. But thanks so much for dropping by, and have a fantastic weekend.
Great, thank you very much. I've got to fill this notebook. It's very empty at the moment.
Ted's notebook.
So I've got to fill it with something. I've got to go and find out what's going on.
Thanks for stopping by,
lot,
Ted.
guys.
Thank you. We'll be back with some more from In the Fast Lane after this. We're back to wrap up Thursday at the Albert Park Grand Prix circuit ahead of the 2022 Formula One Heineken Australian Grand Prix on Sunday. Michael, we've spent a lot of this hour talking about what has happened so far in 2022. Let's look ahead to what we have coming up tomorrow. 2 60-minute free practice sessions, a track that drivers sort of know, but not really. It was very interesting to see how many drivers did walk around laps. Daniel Ricciardo did it in a golf cart, a bit faster, a bit more efficient. But drivers really trying to get their head around this new layout, because I think we're probably underestimating, with a different tarmac here, The lap times are going to be about 5 seconds faster than anything we've ever seen here. There's a lot on the team's plates tomorrow, isn't there?
There's a joke about McLaren and golf carts and speed in there somewhere.
Oh boy, that's harsh.
The only certainty tomorrow is that I'm going to be sunburned. I'm going to be honest with you. I hope people have bought sunscreen. I looked at the weather and it did not look like it was going to be this hot. But it is going to be really interesting because these track changes look small, but they really add up to something substantial. As you said, it's a 5-second time reduction, but it's also just the profile of that back half of the track now, the way they've removed the old 8 and 9.
Correct.
Yes, that's right. Numbers have never been my strong suit. So much faster down through the back there, even through that cool chicane, as Oscar Piastri has dubbed it, and I think we'll try and rename, and down to the new turn 11, is just such a different challenge. So whereas teams will have arrived here in the past, knowing roughly the setup, it's always sort of in the middle of the road in terms of how much downforce you want, in terms of the challenge of the track. This is going to take time to adjust to. The tarmac is also new, which is something that sounds very boring to talk about, but it's key to teams figuring out the setup in terms of tyre life.
Yep.
They're going to need to figure that out because even Pirelli hasn't had that much time to look into how abrasive it is and all that kind of stuff. So there's going to be a lot of learning happening tomorrow, and it'll also probably be pretty low grip. We're going to see a lot of ramping up through the course of the 3 days here to the point where the track as it is tomorrow is not really going to be the same track that we get on Sunday.
No, not at all. I think the other thing we'll see tomorrow too is, just slightly off the track in the pit lane. The pit lane's wider this year by about 2.5 metres. 80k an hour speed limit, not 60. That Albert Park pit lane in the past has been incredibly tight and it's been quite restrictive on strategy. It hasn't really opened up any options. I think we'll see a lot of teams tomorrow doing that pit lane calculation, time loss. There'll be a lot of runs through the pits to see what impact that actually makes on how you could strategically attack these 58 laps on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, strategy's normally been pretty straightforward in Australia, hasn't it? A very one-stop race. Everyone sort of does the same thing. That potentially does open it up, especially if we have teams who are still sort of figuring it out by the time we get to Sunday in terms of the quickest way to get to the end of the race. Having that faster speed limit, 80 kilometres an hour, it's practically CityLink, even though you can never get to 80 kilometres an hour because of the traffic on CityLink. That's pretty good. And also the idea that you can pass as well means that there's not a penalty for pitting as often, theoretically anyway. So the race we'll be dealing with on Sunday will look pretty different, all things considered, to what we've become used to, and hopefully it's all for the better.
Quick one before we wrap up here. A storyline to watch for tomorrow. What are you looking for?
I want to see, first of all, whether Mercedes can stabilise. Now, we know they're not going to be front runners. That's pretty clear, as we've all learned over the last couple of races. But I thought it was really interesting. Hamilton's struggles in Saudi Arabia were not just that he was having difficulty with the car. It was experiments the team was running during Friday just to try and figure out how this car worked. That's so un-Mercedes-like, to not really get the grasp of the car in time for qualifying, so much so that Lewis Hamilton ends up way down in Q1. Is a little bit concerning if you're a Mercedes fan. Let's be honest. That's a sign the team is not really where it needs to be. We already know the car is not where it needs to be. I want to see that they have a greater understanding of that car in time for Sunday. And of course, I want to see what McLaren's going to do because we don't really have a good read on them either, do we? They were the worst team in Bahrain, slowest car. Better in Saudi because the track suited them a little bit better. I think Albert Park, I'd be interested in your take on this, will suit the car a bit better because it's much faster now. But, I mean, how good is good, really? Does that mean lower reaches of the points, upper reaches of the non-points?
Yeah, look, I think for someone like Daniel Ricciardo, I think if he leaves here, with something around about a 7th to 10th place finish in a race with minimal attrition, I think this track will suit that car more. Fewer slow-speed corners, which it doesn't enjoy. And I think the way the track has changed with the faster and flowing section actually throws it more back in the favour of McLaren. So. But look, we'll start to get a bit of a picture of how that's going to shake out for them and all of the other teams tomorrow. But for now, that's where we'll wrap up in the Fast Lane live at the Australian Grand Prix on Thursday. Coming up on Friday from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. right here, right between the two F1 practice sessions, we're going to have interviews with a host of F1 team principals. McLaren's Andreas Seidel, Alfa Romeo's Frederic Vasseur, and Drive to Survive favourite Haas F1 team Gunther Steiner. Bring out the swear machine.
Not to swear, I guess, don't we?
Until then, for Michael Lemonato, I'm Matt Clayton. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for another lap in the Fast Lane.